That's it. Gracias. Buenos días. That's the limit of my Spanish. But I will try to speak slowly because what I have to say is so important for all of us today. I have to confess, I love data. I mean, I really love data. I love data so much that everywhere I go, I have to collect a little bit more of it. So right now, what I want to do is get a show of hands. This is not a test. You're not going to be graded at the end. But I do need a show of hands to know all those who feel that technology, artificial intelligence, and big data is going to revolutionize education. Raise your hand. But before you do, for those who think, actually, probably not, and we better go back to the old ways because they're better, and all this newfangled technology is just going to lead us in the wrong direction. So all those who throw your hat in favor of technology, raise your hand. OK, so that looks like 85.1% of you. All those who say, no, don't do it. Go back to the ways classic, we just need to get better at what we've been doing already. Raise your hand. OK, nobody dares do that. That's bad. That's not good. And the reason that's bad is we need a society that has diverse thinking, that has an opposition, has tension and conflict over the right way forward. Because nobody knows the right way forward. Nobody has the answer, and it's not certain that technology is right in all circumstances for education. And maybe that's the place to begin, thinking about how we see the world. Because we're all looking at the world in different ways, and we think we're seeing one thing, and in fact, it could be something else. All that is around us is that which we experience. Sometimes there's more going on than is around our vicinity. So I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And maybe the appropriate place to begin is with this. Biblioteca Ancadata, the chained library. Hundreds of years ago, books were so precious and knowledge had to be stored away that they were literally chained to the table where people would read them. Information was literally locked up. Now, we've gone far from that period of time. Now information is absolutely everywhere. Information wants to be free. And there's so many great benefits of taking this idea of information and putting it onto a digital setting. And virtual learning is just a portion of that. And there's a whole community of EdTech, as you probably all know, that just believes if we take our technologies and bring it to education, we're going to get some amazing outcomes. And I, for one, believed that. And at the beginning of lockdown, imagine that that was the case, from things like Khan Academy to startups in adaptive learning. And sure enough, lockdown came. We opened up the screen for our kids, and what happened was an incredible success. I'm sure that you, like me, had this exact same experience in your household of children, like everyone who would grade Zoom learning as an A, raise your hand. Aha. Aha. All of you who accepted just 5 minutes ago that we were going to take technology and bring it to education realized that this is not what happened during lockdown. We had more like this. It was chaos. It was a problem. So what happened? What can we learn from this experience? I believe that what we need to do is reframe education. Now, at this point, I also have to make a confession. I didn't expect to have to say in front of you all, which is you'll notice every now and then there's this black slide. So the black slide is that my text that I'd written on my slides are not showing up for some weird reason of Microsoft PowerPoint. So I need to reframe my presentation by explaining what would have been on the slide. And the text on the slide would have said, we need to reframe virtual learning. And then to do that, one way to think about it is with technology. And to understand technology and the importance of technology in virtual learning, let's look at artificial intelligence and one branch of it called machine learning. And the person behind me is Arthur Samuel. And he was a computer engineer in the 1950s, and he worked at IBM. And he is the father of this technique of machine learning, which has become the classic way in which artificial intelligence today works. Now, it's gone much farther, and there's a technique called deep learning, which is a more sophisticated version of it. But to understand the AI revolution, it's really important to understand what he did. So if you're a computer scientist in the 1950s and you work at IBM, what you like to do is to play the machine in a game, like checkers. So he wrote a program to do just that. And he played the machine, and he won. He played the machine, he won. He played the machine, he won. Because the machine only knew what a legal move was. Arthur Samuel knew something else. Arthur Samuel knew strategy. So he wrote a small subprogram that operated in the background that after every move, it would calculate whether the new board configuration would likely lead to a winning board or a losing board. It was a huge probability table, very intricate. And he played the machine again. Won. And he played the machine, and he still won. And then Arthur Samuel left the machine to play itself. The machine played itself, it collected more data. It collected more data, it improved the accuracy of its predictions. And then Arthur Samuel played the machine, and he lost, and he played the machine, and he lost, and he played the machine, and he lost. And Arthur Samuel had created a machine that exceeded his abilities in a task that he taught it. And this idea of machine learning, of artificial intelligence, is going absolutely everywhere. You don't have to program. The machine can infer. It doesn't need explicit instructions, and it can exceed our abilities. And because it's on a digital platform, it can do things more accurately and at an incredible scale. That's why outside this room, everyone's talking about AI. And when we think about machine learning and digitization in higher education, we've got some incredible tools that we can use to improve learning and improve student outcomes. I'm really not going to have any text. Okay, so let's see if I can remember my own presentation. So the first and most important thing that we can do, I should say it's a pity, and I'll have the organizer send it to you. I know that many of you are not native English speakers, so I deliberately put text on the slides so you could see in English what I'd be saying, knowing that this would be a better way of transferring the information like a sage, like an instructor, to a pupil. We'll have to go with just the course without the notes. So the first and most important is that when we take information and we put it into a digital setting, we can identify not just who is reading, but when they're reading, what they're reading, how long they're reading for, whether they're reading in one long stretch or in small little bursts. We can give them a little quiz if we feel like their reading is slower because they're turning the page slower, to sort of wake them up. We can quiz them on material to find out if they're acquiring the knowledge or they're reading without acquiring the knowledge. These are things that instructors and students had always wanted to do and never could do before, and now we can do it. Likewise, the test itself will become alive on a piece of paper. You query the kid, and the person might have got the question wrong because it was an innocent mistake, or they don't know that material, but you don't really know unless you ask a second or third in that same area versus moving on to another set of questions in an ancillary area of the subject that you're testing for. Likewise, in the book I wrote on learning with big data, I interviewed an elementary school teacher in Los Angeles who said that one of the most frustrating things for her was that she would administer a test, and there was always one or two kids in the class who would be done 10 minutes before everyone else, would get everything right, mostly. And she said it was so frustrating because the test is on paper. If only it was on a computer where it could query and go up to the frontier of this person's knowledge. Her answer was, how do I know how much this person knows? I know he did it well, I know she did it well, but maybe there's a lot more to go for. Putting the test on a digital platform allows you to query what isn't known and find out maybe what went wrong, but more importantly, what is known and keep on going. And the student can visualize and see what their acquisition of knowledge is. They can see the holes in their knowledge as well. Now, another element of this is the idea of continual monitoring of the student in a positive way. This is data from a summer school program in California by the Khan Academy. And what's so special about this, I love this chart. It's one of my favorite charts of all time, by the way. See, I've got a laser pointer. These are students, and here are a group of boys, and you can tell by the first few days, these guys are outliers, and they are just crushing it. And this kid in particular is going to do amazing, right? So fantastic. And we all know who they are. They're smug. They're very sort of self-important smiles. They're a little bit of a clique. We've all been in class with them. I used to be one of them, right? So I know all about them. Okay. And look at this poor person right down there. This is a young girl who's not good at math. She's not good at math. Look at that. Like day 10, she's not good at math. And we all know people like that as well. By the way, I am deliberately saying not good at math because I don't believe it. It's BS. No such thing. Might be such thing, not that person. What's important is that we know that we sometimes in education pigeonhole that person in a certain area, and that was unfair, because look what happens. Something in the halfway period starts to click, and soon the kid is making incredible progress, beating all the other kids, until finally she's getting as good, if not better, than that smart guy, and ends the course higher. The system is designed to give up on people like that. Not anymore. If we can monitor it and track it, we can save kids and we can support all of them in their ways. Right? We don't have to make these choices anymore. Another great thing is when you're putting courses on a digital setting, you can teach the teacher. This is a very intricate chart that I'm not going to try to explain to you what it is, or how it works. But what you're actually looking at is the propensity of a student who sees one class to go sequentially to see the next classes. And what the teacher found out was that there was a period of time in which many students, it's not really visible on this particular chart, I'll admit, so I shouldn't actually use the laser pointer. But the point is that the teacher found out that around course 8, there was a lot of pauses on the video. And there was a lot of replays at certain points. Clearly, it was suggesting that the students didn't know something they needed to know. And then the next most likely course to have seen after course 8 was not course 9, but course 3. Scratch his head. What's going on? What's this all about? It turns out it was on machine learning and artificial intelligence, and course 3 was a math refresher. It was suggesting that it had gotten to a point, a cliff, where things were getting really complicated, and as a result, the students need to go back and improve their math skills from the third class of the course 3. But more importantly, the teacher could have also found out, another interpretation, that he wasn't being clear enough, and that's why there were so many pauses and replays at certain periods. The teacher can learn and improve their performance by using this. Another example is that by uploading their homework, he could realize that in one instance, 80% of the class got the answer wrong with the exact same answer. Things you might not have noticed before. Might have in the offline world, but certainly became apparent. He said, okay, this is my fault, not their fault. I've got to teach this again. I've got to explain to them, and I can see what they did wrong. These are the sorts of things we can do when we put it onto digital platforms. Likewise, Duolingo is incredible because at the scale that they're at, they can identify new trends. We've got theories in education about how to learn and what's best. Do you teach pronouns before you teach verbs in language acquisition? Do you go from geometry to trigonometry, or should you go right into algebra and skip trigonometry altogether? They're theories, but the theories don't really work very well. Usually there's small numbers of students. There's outliers. There were old studies. Now on a digital platform, you can run the experiment all the time to find out how can people best learn. But what's really interesting is that you don't need to do it simply on a everyman basis, on a whole cohort. Busu, which is a company that has been very successful and founded by students here at EI, is able to do it on a per-learner basis, on a per-individual basis. And this is really glorious, because now it's no longer about what's great for everyone, it's what's best for me as an individual, as a learner. Yet here we are in education, with the misery of kids looking into a screen and not learning. So what can we do about this problem? The answer is framing. We need to become better framers. Now, framing is how we see the world, how we sort of imagine ourselves in it and the world all around us. We're doing it all the time. It's the mental model by which we make an abstraction or a representation of reality. We think we're in one universe, and it's actually something else. We believe that education and online learning will be successful, but it won't, because there's these other problems we didn't anticipate. We have reframed things before in society. We've done it when we've had the heliocentric theory of the universe, or the geocentric to the heliocentric, putting the Earth at the center, the sun at the center of the universe, and us as just one planet among many, forcing a reconception on how we see the world. And this is really important, because we're going to need to look at the world anew if we're going to make better decisions in it. AI is going to be incredibly successful. One of these images was created by an artificial intelligence algorithm, and the other one was not. Can anyone guess which is which? Who thinks that this was created by an AI? Raise your hand. Wait a minute, you all know this? Okay, there's a couple people over there. How about who thinks this one? And who says don't know? But who says this one? Okay, this is about 10%. And and everyone else doesn't know? Or you're asleep? Don't know, raise your hand. Okay, you're asleep. It's proved. So this one is by Gustave Moreau, who's a French artist in the late 1800s, and this one was created about a month and a half ago in the United States. And it's absolutely stunning. But the point is that we have this technique to do great things, but it can't be the limit of what we apply to. Teaching and instruction needs an analog component as well. And although we have our digital tools to accelerate what we're doing, we certainly need the touch of person and people coming together to learn together. I believe that's going to be ever more essential, and we're going to need to find a symbiosis between the two. The world is different than the one-room schoolhouse on the prairie in which we brought all kids together of certain ages, learning different things, typically reading the Bible. However, there was a benefit of not knowing what to do, because we had to experiment, and we had to find out what was best for an individual student. And the idea of having multiple ages together in the same learning environment may be actually better. The fact that we put all the 13-year-olds together and all the 11-year-olds together, and never the two shall meet, is an artifact of what is useful for administrators, not perhaps what's best for students. I don't purport to know what the right answer is, but I do know that together we are on a quest to try to find the right answers. And when we do, we shouldn't throw out the old techniques either. We need to apply the very basic, more rigorously applied ways of getting kids to learn and inspiring them, not just rely on our digital tools, however important they are and however important we can benefit from them. Ultimately, we need a world of pluralism. Pluralism of ideas, ideas that are in conflict with each other, so we can actually have a rigorous debate to find out what works best. But we also need mental flexibility to accept the fact that we don't know the answers and that we're on this quest together. Thank you very much.
Okay. Wow, this works.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Great.
All right. First of all, that was a fantastic talk. I paid incredible attention. I think everybody appreciates it. I appreciate it. We did talk before about things that we could discuss, but on purpose, I did not share any of the questions with you because I thought, well, I'll make it live and interactive. And then the surprise was actually on me, because while I was sitting there, some of the questions I had, you answered them.
Did I answer them correctly?
Hold on. And so I thought, why don't I make up some new questions? So these are not even the questions these are the questions that I had once I heard your talk. And so it's like double removed, like double.
Double blind, exactly.
Yeah. And but you did make a comment to me. Is there anything we could disagree on? Because I agree with you on so many things to start with. So I tried to find some stuff. Okay.
Great.
So let's
Good.
see what we can do. All right. Let me start with you made a comment that in the playing of the game. That the computer can become better than the person who taught it, right? You explained basically what reinforcement learning is, okay? And but the game example is a very limited example, and I wonder if you're willing to kind of go a little bit wider into just how much AI can do and can't do, because the game example is a narrow one. In real life, the thing that you're trying to get, the rules are changing, the objectives are multi-objective, the players are multiplayer. So you don't have one player, you have 1 million players, you have the whole world as a population. And you don't actually have all this data. So I'm taking the argument here, and I'm saying we collectively can't even teach AI to do what a 3-year-old child can figure out. So before we go to, it can be better than all of us, I want to hear the argument to that.
So there's a lot that I agree. So there's a lot that I agree with. However,
Yeah.
I'll take the bait
Yeah.
and focus on what I disagree with.
Okay.
Okay. So it is classically true that checkers or chess is a game. It's a bounded environment. There's only 68 squares. You know what winning and losing is, and real life is absolutely not like that. However, can we turn parts of education into an environment that resembles a game? The answer is probably yes. And if we can, then we can apply this technique to win at the game. And I'll give you an example. One is a test can be considered a game. You know what a right answer is, what a wrong answer is. And so perhaps you can actually find a way to use this technique in that way. But I'll go even further to say that when we're using AI, we can actually create an environment whereby we don't need to actually know what is the best thing. It just needs to be better than what already exists. Millions, billions of dollars are spent by Silicon Valley firms to increase our engagement on a platform like Twitter, so that if we open up the app on our phone at 11:30 at night, we might not actually hit the pillow until 1:30, spending 2 hours mindlessly scrolling. They spend a fortune to get us to do that. Why not apply that game-like mentality of applying artificial intelligence to see what keeps individuals hooked in engaging with the app and applying it to learning, so that kids spend time actually spending more time, not transformatively amount, but enough more on their studies rather than something else.
Yeah. So I love your answer. And what you did was you reframed it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a technique.
So
if you can learn it too.
I gave you this question, and you said, oh, but you know what? If we just talk about making education a game, I make the problem simpler. So I'm with you there. Okay. So let me try to expand it back in a different way. All right. So I'll tell you a story. All my degrees are electrical engineering, and when I got done with the first of them, I went to work at a company you've heard of, Hewlett-Packard. In fact, we were making the first laser print at the time. And when I had my first problem assignment, the problem they gave me, it's a technical problem. It's something to do with crystal oscillators and frequency and drift and things like that. Anyway, so they gave me this problem, and I looked at like the shelf of books that I had been through for the last 4 years. And I'm like, which book is the answer to this problem in? And it took me about, I don't know, 15 minutes thinking about it, and like, it's not in any of these books. Whatever problem you get after once you graduate is, and we could even take data. I mean, if you really want, like I could ask this question, or you can ask the question, like, the first thing that you did when you got out of school, could you find how to do it in the book, okay? And I'm just gonna venture to say it's way more than 50%. It might be 99%, it could be 100%. I think there's what you learn in school, so I'm saying, okay, fine, maybe we can really gamify how you can like come up the traditional learning curve in education. But what if what we're teaching is just disconnected and not relevant? And how do you put that back in the frame?
It's a big problem. Not every educator is wise enough to pose that question, so already you've hit a certain bar, which is complementary to you and what you're doing. There's techniques, right? It's going to sound like a parody, but I mean it sincerely. The Harvard Business Case Study, which is 101 years old, was founded with the idea that they wanted to teach students how to think through problems, not to know what the answer was, but how to conceptualize the problem. Now, prior to that time, the teaching of business was incredibly abstract, and it was basically financial accounting. And it was really divorced of real-world applicability. And the case study method was not about what should you do in this instance. It was, and the very first one, which was called the General Shoe Company, is what is the right way to understand this problem, right? What are the germane features that need to be prioritized? And you think about it, and you think, whoa, that's exactly right. And then you see the other case studies come out, and I forgot the person's name who instituted it. It slipped my mind. But he was I think it might have been Langdell, Dean Langdell. He was a genius in understanding that the needs of the student were to have different frames, that they can see the world as a junior executive and sort of know where things slot in, that when I'm dealt with this sort of problem, I need to conceptualize it this way. But when I see a problem like this, I can conceptualize it this way. Not to say that these 8 or 10 or 15 ways of seeing are the only ones, but it's to set you off on the idea that when you're facing a problem, look at it in this way. And if that doesn't help you, reframe it, see it from a different angle, change the features, emphasize this, minimize that, and then maybe you can solve it.
I like it. We agree.
Oh,
we
sorry.
agree on this, yeah. And so I think Harvard did a great job taking education from one level to the next level. And the case studies that you're talking about, it's basically how do you give students an experience that they don't have time to have, right? So,
Exactly.
right, that's what you're doing.
Yep.
So you're saying instead of showing you formulas and math and whichever, we're going to like take you through an experience as if you worked at this company and you worked at this company and you did this other thing and you were in this crisis situation and now you didn't have 50 years to go work in all those companies, but in one semester you can imagine you were there, you can frame it in your mind using the language, and so that's great because you've got this simulated history to work on. And I think that works up to a point, and now I think we have to go to the next thing. And I think the next problem is when you're innovating, when you're doing something new, you're in an environment which everything is different. You cannot necessarily use the recipe of the past. The thing that worked in 1950 may not work with computers available in 1970, may not work with social media available in 2000. And so you're learning like certain things, but now you're in a completely new environment. And how do you join in and literally discover the solutions? I think that's where, I'm not saying I have the exact solution, we're working on it, but you're right. It's like these major different techniques of education, we might be ready for the next one. That's kind of what I guess I can, like if I frame it as a question, it's my comment. If I frame it as a question, what do you think? Like, do you see that there could be an evolution after case study?
Undoubtedly, of course, it has to. Well, first, I think the case study is a very good method, so there's nothing wrong with it. There already has been an evolution. Joel Podolsky at Yale, he's now the head of Apple University. He was plucked from the dean of the Yale School of Management by Steve Jobs personally to sort of create the learning environment. Steve knew he was going to die in a few years, and he wanted to have executives to have his way of thinking. So he created Joel Podolsky, who'd done some really revolutionary things. In particular, he introduced team teaching. He changed the name of courses from accounting to like business and society and all that. But he also did team teaching, which was important. Oh, I should also say the classrooms changed in their structure, so they were now oval-like rather than just simply an amphitheater. So you didn't have the sage on the stage. It was like King Arthur's table where everyone was largely equal, largely. But then you also had team teaching, so that for every problem, you saw multiple ways of answering it. There was no one correct answer. There's this, but there's also this. So that was the evolution of the case study. But I guess the bigger point is a more epistemic one, which is how do we acquire new knowledge, and how do we broach the frontier of what we do to do better and more? The economist Deirdre McCloskey likes to say that she feels that the term capitalism is a misnomer. It's really not about capital. It should be called experimentalism. It's about an economy that is constantly experimenting. Now, it's interesting that we're going to have retailers that come up with all these different products, and like 80% of them fail, and there's some that will actually stick around. So they're constantly experimenting. Yet in education, we're not. And so how do we create the platform, the environment for institutions to experiment in the way they teach? Now, the problem is that when you fail, some kid has paid tuition and doesn't know what he or she hoped to learn, and that's a problem. We've got to rectify that. But it would be interesting to reconceptualize, reframe education, and imagine how can we bring in experimentation so we can learn how kids learn best.
Let me ask this next question as a double question. All right. So on one hand, we've been, there's a thread of AI here. We say education is changing. There's new things that can happen. You talk about case study, Apple, all of these things. And you had some great examples from your talk, like how it can be interactive and how you can monitor per student. I think those are like strong points in what and the gamification. Those are strong points in like at least one version of how education can be improved. Frame it from the teacher's point of view. How should the teacher think about all this technology and all these things? Should they be careful, critical, because you can really do it wrong, to your part of your point? Should they be like, let's try everything? Should they be afraid of it? Or should they be afraid that one day it will be teaching and they won't be teaching? Like, how does the teacher frame for them what all this technical capability will lead to?
Great question. I think that the teacher can best see it as, oh, it's a telescope. I've been looking at the night sky with my naked eye every night and trying to understand why the stars are here and the planets are going around. I see regularity, and now I can see much more clearly. So I've been monitoring students and assessing them and working with them, and now I've got this new tool that makes it a lot easier. There's going to be some joker on a school board or some administrator who's going to say, and now we need less teachers, we're going to buy from this company, and now we're not going to need to spend on the unions, right? And that would be totally wrong. I mean, as many people know, one of my great passions...
You'll be back to Zoom and a chat bot.
Well, that's what they think. But of course, my view is, well, if we have this incredible ability to track students and understand what they're doing and find out what works, why do we have one teacher and 20 kids? Why don't we have like 2 teachers for every 7 kids, right?
Yeah.
And it's a complete inversion. I think that if we have these tools to do well, maybe that's the right answer. Maybe we want to have 1 teacher for 3 kids, right? We just have to recreate our institutions. These are choices that we have to make as a society. Don't tell me that we can't afford it. We pay lots of money on lots of things that we feel like we can't afford, but then we justify.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm just contemplating it. No, actually, I'm just stuck trying to talk. Okay.
We have water.
Okay, all right. Okay. We got water and we got 3 minutes, so I'm like in a rush here.
Good, yeah.
All right, so I think that's great. In a way, it's a telescope. It's a tool. The teacher should use the tool if it's effective, right? And we kind of go from there. I'm going to go back to a previous writing of yours, and let's just see if I can put this together. This is my last question.
You're holding me to account. I don't like this. I'm a journalist. I hold others to account, but I never want to be held to account myself.
Don't worry. It's not a critical account. Okay. So I just was observing that in your earlier book on data and AI, you're really making a case for it's not just more of the same, and there's a lot of it's like with every one of these advancements, you can't always guess just how far you can take it. And a little bit, that means that, every 5 years, every year, whatever, in some time period, you advance faster than you advanced in the period before. And a little bit, I guess what I'm saying is that there's an unpredictability when you... Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I want to retract that question. You can answer the question later. Okay. Yeah. All right. The question that I want to ask...
Go for the jugular.
No, this is a better question. This is a better question. What I want to ask you is, isn't there something in education that just has to do with all of society here? Because, all this education, all this capability as a world, we had this COVID pandemic. We were able to create a vaccine in 1 year. I mean, it's like amazing, okay? Completely new technology. I mean, sure, it was built on past research and all, but in 1 year, and we've got this, like, quote, solution to, like, a really nightmare problem, and then we can't convince 30% of the population to take it. So, like, maybe we've got all the answers and we do this amazing thing. Is there, like, I'll just put it together, is it an unintended consequence? Is there a social thing going on that we got to consider, that maybe the magic bullet just won't work because people don't want it, or I don't know.
It is such a good question, and I'm really glad you raised it with 33 seconds left to go.
Yeah.
I want to thank everyone. So I really, really struggle with this. And I don't want to fall into we'll call it intellectual cliches about it. Okay, intellectual cliche number one is that the world has been bifurcated into the clerics and the monasteries and the masses and the people outside the gates of the court, the peasants and the serfs and the monks and the scholars. Another variant of that is Arnold Toynbee, the historian, who referred to the creative minority, this group of people who enter in at moments of crisis, who will save society if it is to be saved at all. he always pointed out. I note that Kepler had to leave the court in either Germany or Denmark, I think it was Germany. No, in Denmark, to go back home to defend his mother in the 1600s, to defend his mother from charges of witchcraft, which was a capital offense. Right? So the person who is actually using math to understand planetary motion in an extraordinary way and advancing the field of knowledge at a time of great findings of knowledge, we also have this great era of superstition and sort of a barbaric approach. I don't know what to do with that melancholic view that we have this bifurcated society of a group of people who invent vaccines, a group of people who are smart enough to take vaccines, and the rest, and Darwinism will sort it out, which is a euphemism to say that they'll just die and their genes will just perish from the face of the earth. I don't know. I don't
think you can go with that.
No, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. But the point is that, but those are the cliches. Those are the intellectual cliches that I resist. I am mystified by this informational nihilism that we are in. A former president of the United States has said on live television that he thought beaming light into the body or drinking disinfectant would be a useful remedy for COVID. And you think, wait a minute, this country put a man on the moon 50 years earlier and now has this? Like, how are these two things possible? And my answer is, I don't know, I'm lost, but I do know this.
I did it. I stumped him.
Exactly.
It took half an hour, but we got there.
But here's where you take it. I don't need to know the answer. All I can do is make the world a little bit better. I'm a journalist. I can recommit myself to trying to, where I can, bring light. That's it.
No, but okay. So there's a lot of contribution in all of the discussion, and really appreciate the points that you're making. So definitely, we can do a lot improving education in the narrow sense. We can do a lot in the broad sense. The AI, the tools, I think we're all heading in the right direction. I think maybe we're just leaving it as an open question here at the end about where does the role of education fit with the reason that people who don't take the vaccine, why they don't take the vaccine is because there's some other power structure going on. There's some other influence, and there's someone that is powerful that is not benefited if these people join another group, something along those lines. And so, where does education, like in the broadest sense, get us to like jump over, these things?
There's one. I mean, there's one. This is going to sound so peculiar, but the idea of making decisions based on reason and rationality, it's a toolkit, right? And it's applicable and useful in certain domains, but it doesn't help us in others. And if we accept that, which is humbling for eggheads who are usually university professors and journalists, and if we accept that, then we can say, well, what is the right mechanism to understand an issue, if not with reason and rationality? I come to this very peculiar, spiritual or nihilistic view because of the scientist James Lovelock, who sort of seeded the idea in me, who was very uneasy with linear thinking.
Yeah.
And the theologian Karen Armstrong talks about in how throughout time the role of reason and rationality versus spirituality as different parts of the human intellect and decision making, saying that scholars had seen that they were separate and different, and you can make decisions based on different ways. So I do wonder, maybe what you would do is say, we're not going to cram down facts into anti-vaxxers' minds like stuffing a Christmas goose. Maybe we should bring in a celebrity who will motivate the person on emotional grounds, not rational ones.
All right. So I think we're going to kind of leave it here, but I want to say that maybe we've come to the point in the conversation where the answer, like, I like your answer, right? It's like part of this is logical thinking, part of this is the inductive learning, the idea of discovery, part of this is the humanities and knowing what is the actual problem. And I think just if we can agree, the mixture of all this is let's say, if not the whole, at least part of the solution.
I would agree with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Good.